Hello, all of my gorgeous, wonderful, fabulous scorekeepers out there. This is Rocky at the top of the show. And welcome to The Score. This is your favorite podcast where we talk about art and culture as seen through our black queer lenses. So, after the last time that we recorded, we had a little production meeting, and we all realized that we are all going to be outside this summer. So, periodically, we will have some new, fresh episodes for you, but periodically, maybe once a month or so, we are going to drop a rerun. And I know before you get mad, a rerun. um, these are our episodes that have not been released on this feed yet. So some of you might remember that that weird 6 months, weird but exciting 6 months in early 2024 when we were hosting a show for Lincoln Center called Art Class. And so from time to time, we like to just drop an episode here and there for you all to hear, those of you who are fans of the score who might not have made it over to art class. We had some really exciting, amazing guests and really wonderful conversations. If you scroll back in this feed, you'll see some of the re-released episodes. I believe our episode with Big Frida was the last one that we re-released. And I'm really, really excited to share this conversation with you today. I know that the main conversation that we had was with Lecolion Washington was really impactful for me personally. Kind of really made me think sort of about my career in a very different way, as a black person, as a queer person in the arts. But I think just as, if you are, a queer person, if you are a person of color, I think it really holds some value for you too. And of course, all of our white listeners as well. It's always good for you all to sort of be a fly on the wall, I suppose, in these conversations. And then, of course, Paige interviewed the amazing musician Sona Jobarteh, and that was an interview that took a while for us to set up, but was so beneficial and wonderful, and such a great conversation there too. So I hope you all enjoy this, and we will be back in a couple of weeks. As usual, everybody be safe out there. Happy Pride and happy summer. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye bye. Oh my goodness gracious. It is time for another episode of Art Class. Hello, everyone, our wonderful classmates. It's so good to have you in class once again. This is Lincoln Center's podcast, all about decolonizing the arts and arts education one episode at a time. I finally came up with our tagline. Do you like it?
Say it again. Let me think about it.
Decolonizing the arts and arts education one episode at a time. Huh?
Oh, I do like it. That's very
Yeah.
good.
Thank
Good
you.
job. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It only
Or is
took
it one
what,
class
like,
at a time?
oh.
Mm.
All right. Well, there you go.
One lesson at a time? I don't know. I'm just
Okay, we're still working on it. Anyway, I am Rocky Jones. As always, I'm here with the amazing Paige Reynolds and Dr. Lee Bynum. Hello, you two. How are you both doing today?
Hello. I'm chilling. Carefree Friday. Happy it's the weekend. Ready to watch a little bit of low stakes TV or something like that.
Okay, I like that. I like low stakes.
Yeah.
And Lee?
I am doing just fine. I'm super excited. I'm going to go see some opera tonight with an all-black cast and an all-black creative team. Super excited to see that. And maybe in the spirit of that, I will offer a greeting to our friends in Nubia. Hello, Nubia.
What's up, Nubia?
Yeah,
hey,
Nubia.
How y'all doing? Well, we have a jam-packed show for you today, and we have so much that I feel like we should just get to it. I'm so excited that we got part 2 of Paige's interview with the incredible Sona Jobarteh coming up as part of the Kinfolk series. If you did not hear the first part, highly recommend going back to our last episode and listening to part 1 of that conversation, because she's real smart.
Super smart.
Required listening.
I mean, I'm just saying. And speaking of real smart, I am so excited about our first conversation that we are going to get to today. The brilliant, absolutely brilliant Lecolion Washington is on the show today to take us to church, take us to school, take us to the White House, take us everywhere, honey, take us to space. Talking about just a second, I guess, what do we want to call this? Sort of a complement to our conversation last week with Julia Bullock about creating more equitable spaces, more inclusive spaces in opera and classical music, and all of the incredible work that he is doing in that space up in Boston. And throughout his whole career, going to South Africa and meeting Desmond Tutu and all this business. just incredible. And we get into so much. We get into fundraising, we get into DEI, we get into teaching the next generation, and it's also really kind of incredible, especially in this moment right now with everything that is happening on college campuses across the country, to have 2 educators on the show that are talking about how important it is to create brave spaces along with safe spaces and inclusive spaces and equitable spaces. And now I'm mumbling and I'm going on and on, but
but ashe, because these were things that we needed to hear and things that we all should be thinking about right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So enough of us, of course, but we'll be around for the whole show. No, so what am I talking about?
We're on the interview, not quite enough of us.
Let's get straight to it. After the break, Lecolion Washington.
Welcome back, everybody. Class is back in session. We have a fantastic interview for you today. Not only that, but we are joined by another host, our amazing coordinator and accomplished violinist, Emilia Mettenbring. Yay!
Welcome to the convo.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad to be here, especially for this one.
Yeah, especially for this one. I'm like, this is right up your alley. Just makes sense for you to be here. We are going to be interviewing Lecolion Washington. Woo! Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't always get fireworks and applause like that. So it's nice to have it. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to let the people know who you are, and then we'll jump in. So after over 20 years as a performing musician, 15 years as a music professor, and 10 years as an arts administrator, Lecolion Washington has established himself as a leader for the next generation of arts entrepreneurs, and he has been a staunch advocate for the relevance of music as an agent for social change. Lecolion is the executive director of Community Music Center of Boston. Prior to moving to Boston, Lecolion was the co-founder, executive director of the Prism Ensemble in Memphis from 2009 to 2017, and he was the founder of the Prism International Chamber Music Festival. In 2015, he was named as one of the Memphis Business Journal's top 40 under 40. He was selected as a 2019 Musical America's Top Professional of the Year, honoring innovators, independent thinkers, and entrepreneurs, celebrated as the 2020 Boston Hub Week Changemaker, and he is the 2020 Chamber Music America Conference Planning Committee Chair. As a bassoonist, Lecolion has performed solo recitals and master classes at colleges and universities all over the world. He has been a featured solo and chamber musician throughout the US, Brazil, South Africa, Canada, and Switzerland, among others. As an orchestral musician, Lecolion has performed as guest principal and or co-principal bassoon with orchestras such as the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, Iris Orchestra, and Sphinx Symphony Orchestra. He served on the faculty of the Stellenbosch International Chamber Music Festival in South Africa from 2006 to 2013, and his CD entitled Legacy, Music for Bassoon by African American Composers was released on the Albany Records label. So accomplished.
Yes, worldwide.
Yes, worldwide, international entrepreneur, musician. We're honored to have you. And I think the first question I want to start off with is with Prism in Memphis, and like what was the need and like the energy that was born out of?
Yeah, I think that particular organization was a byproduct of me and my ex-wife. We were looking for performance opportunities for us as new people moving to Memphis. I was fortunate to be a musician at the Stellenbosch International Chamber Music Festival in South Africa that you mentioned in the bio. And when I was there, that was really one of my first big international experiences as a musician. Mm-hmm. And it was in South Africa at a time that was kind of a post-apartheid South Africa. So in South Africa, of course, you have an oppressed Black majority. Mm-hmm. And when I went back to Memphis, I realized that in Memphis, you actually had a very similar dynamic. You had, Memphis is a city that at the time was 60% Black. And it was a big chunk of those folks were living at or near the poverty line. And so you had this kind of apartheid-like dynamic in this city. But what I saw in my time in South Africa was that this idea that music could play a role in the evolution of a city, and particularly where young students of color could see themselves existing in the ecosystem. First of all, recognizing that there was one, recognizing that they could maybe be part of it, and recognizing there were specific things that they could do. And so from there, that was where the program in Memphis came from, was me thinking about my own lived experience and how I was always looking for pathways and places and spaces that had people who looked like me. I wanted to be around Black men, successful Black men. And so in this program was really an offshoot of that one.
Beautiful. I love the international connection. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was phenomenal. I will say these were really some of the best musicians in the world. I was able to be part of that program for maybe about 8 or 9 years. And these were the best musicians in the world. And I do remember there was one time in particular, I'm glad we're talking about it so I can share it. One year, Archbishop Desmond Tutu was a narrator for one of the pieces there. And at the end of his narration, there's the line where you get to meet Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And I, of course, as one of the featured performers that week, we were at the front of the line. So I get there, I'm maybe the third or fourth person. I go to shake his hand and thinking I'm going to get my photo op and then walk away. And he squeezed my hand for me to stay. And I was just like, okay. I look over at his handlers and I'm like, there's a long line of people. Are you okay that I stick around here to talk to him for a second? So he reaches up and puts his hand on my shoulder and pulls me down to kneel next to him so we can talk. And he says, I think I've heard about you, bassoon, right? And I was like,
oh my gosh.
You've been coming here for many years, right? And I was like, yes, I have. And he said, I hope that you know what your presence means to our country. You are relevant to the building of our country. These young people are going to grow up and they will have seen you on that stage their entire lives, and their parents never had an opportunity to experience that. So I just want you to know that you are helping us to build what our country is going to be in the future.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought that was it. And that moment, it was 2013, that moment changed my entire life. That was the moment in which I started thinking about what was my impact going to be outside of just the notes that were coming out of my bell, but as who I was and who I showed up as, and what was I modeling for people for their own future. That was a significant moment for me. So I'm glad I have a chance to share it, because it literally, full disclosure, it changed my life. Because this is a man who's been a spiritual leader for the evolution of a post-apartheid South Africa. And he's telling me that me as a person playing the bassoon, it matters. And I think that was something that I've never forgotten. It actually gives me goosebumps even when I think about it, because I thought that I always wanted to be known as a great musician. But I realized in that moment that my entire identity was something that was part of my art. And I needed to make sure that I made space for my whole self as well as for my art form.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking about that moment still. And, there's this, some people call it a burden or this challenge, but there's this amazing opportunity that we have. For me as a Black person, there's this amazing opportunity that I have to be able to have an impact on my entire marginalized group.
Mm-hmm.
We have these opportunities to be able to create pathways to model in ways that I think that are things that we should honor. I think more than viewing them as a burden. These are opportunities for us to really honor the gift that we have, to be able to create these opportunities for others to walk in our footsteps. So many people created these opportunities for us to walk in their footsteps. And we still, in our generation, we still get an opportunity to do the same. So as much as that is a weight for some and a challenge, and it speaks to the systemic oppression that we all exist in, even inside that, it also is this beautiful thing, that's this opportunity that we have. And so I try to view it as both. I try to recognize that the system is busted in ways that it actually, that's not fair. The system is functioning exactly in the way it was designed, so it's actually at optimum. But I also believe that we and myself, I have an opportunity to be part of building a new system, and so I'm excited about that, actually, more than I feel it as a burden, especially on a day like today.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for saying that, because, my day-to-day, as hopefully most people know, I'm embedded in an organization doing DEI work. And, I feel both of those things, like you just said, sort of the opportunity and the burden of it. And I think especially at the beginning, it was like every Black and brown person that comes off that elevator, I'm going to create, meaningful opportunities and positive impact for all those people. And then, the system starts working as it's designed, and it can get very challenging and frustrating and disheartening and all of those things. So thank you for reminding me of that, because sometimes I need somebody in my life to remind me of that. But, a question that I have for you is, especially, as somebody who is in the position that I'm in, I'm constantly sort of wondering, like, sort of looking back, especially to sort of the moments that we had in 2020 and 2021, around, orchestras and opera companies and other arts organizations sort of doing all of this work around creating equitable spaces and inclusive spaces. And actually, when we met at Sphinx Connect in 2023, you were moderating a panel all about sort of the musical chairs of BIPOC leaders in these organizations. And so I'm curious, sitting here in 2024, I'm reading about the state of Iowa eliminating all of the EDI offices in their public universities. And literally the lady was like, we need to create more spaces where young white men, rural white men, can feel comfortable and can feel like they belong. And it's just like, and I'm wondering, from your perspective, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what are some of the things that we need to be mindful of in this new sort of landscape where this backlash is happening. It's not just apathy, it's actual hostility and backlash in a lot of cases. And so what are some of your perspectives on that?
They're going to do what they're going to do. And if I spend a lot of my time in these places that I know aren't going to move, if I spend my time thinking about how to get them to move, I then start getting my mind wrapped around what Paul Gorski would call the pace of privilege. Right? Trying to figure out, how does that privilege move and how do I move it, try to move at its pace, or even try to change its pace. It's like, no offense, but that's not where I want to be. I'm actually really trying to think about what are ways in which I can move at the pace of change. And where are the places and spaces that are thinking about change? Well, how can I get on a podcast like this one and really be talking about things that are about change? Not can I get some predominantly white organization or predominantly white institution that doesn't believe Black people exist to hire one. Right. Like, I get it. And I think people need to do that. And I believe in people doing that. But for me, I'd much rather be interested in a predominantly white institution that has decided to recognize that it is an oppressive and exclusionary space. And so it wants to remove all the barriers that it has put up so that people can't get in and through. Like, I want to be talking to them. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be spending too much time in this place that one wants to get one. They're trying to, it's like that tokenism stuff where you're trying to find what's the minimum standard. What's the least amount of y'all I got to pay attention to so people don't bother me? I stopped doing that a minute ago. I used to be in those conversations, but they ended up being so whack and they were bad for my soul. I couldn't do it.
I'm really glad that you said that, Professor Washington. And I feel like I should call you Professor Washington because I'm sitting here absolutely in class right now.
I feel like I should call you Pastor Washington. I should put on a
suit. I absolutely love what you were saying on a couple of points, right? Because I think this idea that that some things haven't worked, it doesn't sit comfortably against the fact that the system was set up to do a kind of thing, and it does it remarkably well, right? And, Rocky and Paige and Emilia and I have had variations of a conversation frequently about, do people want change, right? Like, do they actually want it? And I think part of, the only reasonable conclusion a lot of times is that the answer is no. And I think sometimes the answer is no because it's so unclear what change looks like. What is equity, right? And I would love it if you maybe could say a couple of things about what the space might look like if it were differently equitable or differently accessible.
Yeah, and I agree with you. There's a lot of these places that are trying to rewrap the same present, and telling us it's something new. And so I was like, bro, that's the same G.I. Joe I got last year. That's the same one, right? Like, you can't give me an okie doke. I can see that, right? So to me, what success looks like, and I've been thinking about this in my own organization. As an organizational leader, we have to have a vision, right? We have to be able to have a sense, maybe we can't articulate it yet, but we have to have a sense of what success looks like. And to me, what success looks like is that when people think about the various components of their identity, they feel like there's a critical mass of individuals around them that they can commune with in that identity. And there's a critical mass of those individuals, not only in numbers, but also there's an equity of power. So all these people who have all of these various identities that I am in, that are part of who I am, when I look at the power structure, when I look at the numbers, I can see all of that around me. I am wrapped and hugged in all the parts of my identity from an emotional perspective, but also from a power perspective. So I don't get to a certain point in the institution where the institution stops hugging me. Right? It doesn't happen. Right. So to me, equity is a space that recognizes that and that is their North Star. That is the thing that they are driving toward. So when they're looking at their policies and looking at their practices, they can look at it from a metrics perspective for sure. But the metrics don't tell the whole story, because you can get all skin folk and kinfolk, right? And so you can have a lot of Black and brown folks who aren't looking out for the interests of Black and brown people. That happens with women. That happens with people with their various gender identities, sexual orientations as well, and every other marginalization you can think of, right? And so it's not just a numbers game, right? You're trying to think about, do the folks in power, are they really the folks who are going to support me being hugged in that identity as I move through this institution? Or are they going to become my oppressor, right? Are they just going to be a Black version or a male version, right, of my oppression? Because if that be the case, then regardless of what we've done from a metrics-based perspective, we haven't actually changed anything. We rewrap that present. That's the same G.I. Joe. Right. And so I think, to me, success looks like places who are really striving for that. They're looking at it from a metrics-based perspective. So they're not just, doing the kind of kumbaya hugging and we're all happy. They're actually looking at it from a metrics-based perspective, because I think the numbers tell a part of the story. But then they're also looking at it from a power-based perspective and looking at how people are amplifying their identities and how they wrapping their arms around all these various identities inside their institution. And so to me, that's a hard thing to get to. And I get that, but that's the end goal. And so if everyone is striving for that and striving for all those things simultaneously, not saying first we're going to do the metrics part and then we're going to do the culture part, or first we're going to do the culture part. So, look, I think we're pretty inclusive, even though we have no Black people. But maybe I think if we get some, then I think it's going to be great. I think we're ready. I don't think that's the way either. But to me, viewing all those things as things that are meant to happen simultaneously, to me, that is the thing. To me, that is the thing that we are searching for, and that is the thing that we are fighting for. And I do believe we should refer to it as a fight, right? That we are fighting for, because when you are fighting, you must be courageous. Mm-hmm. And so it requires a certain amount of courage that sometimes it's hard for people to call upon. But I think referring to it as a fight, if someone was coming after my kids, I'd be courageous as hell, right? Because, hey, that's my babies, and I'm going to fight for them. And so I think that when we think about this thing, we should be thinking about it as, and not necessarily as a fight, like a fist fight, but something that we are going to have to be courageous. Sometimes my fighting for my kids is using my own power to move things in their favor, right? It doesn't mean I'm just fighting people for the sake of fighting, right? But I think that having, it does require some courage. So in those moments when there's this fear, the change comes when people recognize that is when we're doing something right. And that's the moment in which we have to tap into our courage and keep moving things forward.
Yep.
I have been taught to be wary of someone who enjoys being the only, actually don't trust somebody who enjoys being the only. Mm-hmm. That's a person who doesn't create doors. They don't send the elevator back down. They get off and hold it. And so, I have experienced that. So there are a lot of people who I know and I respect the things that they're doing, but I also recognize that there's a part of them that enjoys being one of the only, because it allows them to feel good that they did it, that they were able to beat the system, although the system remains the same. And to me, that's not the point. To me, the point is absolutely to ensure that you are using that power to create the barriers, not only far away from you where young people are involved, which I think is really important. So a lot of my work is in the youth space. So a lot of people are creating opportunities for young people to get through. And I am fully in support of that. And I've devoted at least this chapter of my life to that as well. So I don't hate on that. But then inside their institutions where all the power is, they're not necessarily fighting there. They're allowing themselves to be in rooms where they're the only. And to me, I'll ask people who is there, who's in the room, right? Because I maybe don't want to be there. I don't care how dope it is. I may not want to be there if that's what the room is. And I have asked multiple people when they've invited me to things, who all over there? Right? Because there's certain kinds of conversations I don't want to have. And actually, I'll say one thing about my organization, the Community Music Center in Boston. The board that hired me, as I've gotten to know that board, that was a really impressive thing that they hired me because, and people have heard me say this many times, I said some really outlandish things in my interview. I was working with the Memphis Music Initiative. It was a predominantly Black space. I had a predominantly Black team. I think my team was all Black. And it was the smartest people, some of the smartest people I've ever been around, just from person to person. Boom, 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 boom. It felt like a think tank. And so I was super happy doing that. And so when I was going to move to another institution, I was like, if I'm going away from that, this thing's going to have to be right. And when I talked to this board, I said, listen, if y'all just want to hire yourselves a Black ED, I ain't the one, right? So don't play yourselves. You'll be looking for another executive director in 2 years. But if you're thinking about really changing some things, really recognizing what the blind spots are in this institution, I could be the one. But you're going to have to be about that life. Hiring me is going to be the easiest thing you will ever do. Because the hard work will begin with me after I get there. Right? That's when the real hard things start to happen. You're going to have make some really tough decisions, and you're going to have to make some decisions that are likely in your blind spots, things you don't understand. You're just going to have to trust me. If you're not ready to do that, don't play yourself. I said that my first dinner. My board chair now, who was maybe he wasn't even vice president then, he was just on the search committee. My board president now, he tells that story to people because he was like, man, you came in on fire. And I was like, yeah, man, because listen, I did not want to be in a space like some of the spaces I was bred in. I was in music schools and conservatories and orchestras. I was, faculty members, where in some of those cases I was one of only or one of 2 or 3. And it was harder on me than I realized at the time, right? I was someone who didn't realize until I was liberated that I had been in some environments that weren't good for me. And I was like, I'm not doing that again. And I was shocked that I got hired. So I do want to shout out that board. So I'm not saying that all predominantly white spaces are the enemy. I would never say that because I can see some spaces that are doing some really good work. But I do want to name that you have to be ready to move inside your blind spots and actually approve and agree with some things that you don't understand.
So I raised my hand because I feel like I'm in class for real right now. But I just we haven't spoken in a while as friends on this kind of a level. So it's worth me asking because I feel like you're in a position now where you have some power, you have powerful people around you. You're in a space where, and you were just speaking about what power is and how it aligns itself. And then there's that piece that's like, you're going to have to move in directions where you might have some blind spots and we talk about this a lot in equity work, that equity to a person who has privilege may at first show up like disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough sell. And so I want to hear you speak a little bit about the money piece of like, how do you get someone to opt in, to bring the dollars, to vote for with their pocketbook, something that might look like disadvantage to them from their white perspective or from, a political perspective?
Well, I think it's 2 things. I think that some people, it depends on the person. Some people you're not going to move them, right? And so that's, but some folks who can be moved, oftentimes there's a perspective that they lack. And so you've got to find some bridge between something that they know into this thing that's actually a blind spot of theirs. So for example, I will ask people oftentimes, particularly white people, I ask them, have you ever been in a space when you were the only white person? You ever been to a Black church? And sometimes people be like, yeah, I have been, because a lot of folks have gone to one that one time. Right? Or they went to that program at the symphony that was the gospel choir that most of the white people didn't go to, but they went and it was super Black in there. And they were like, yo, this is a different usage of this space. And so they experienced that. And I was like, were you hyper aware that you were white in that space? And sometimes they were like, oh yeah, absolutely. Imagine if that was the only space you were in and you were always hyper aware of that, right? Imagine that feeling. And I remind them that when people are talking about equity, they talk about it, I think, sometimes in the wrong way, because they talk about it using this beautiful language, that it's going to be this beautiful thing. I even did it myself. But alongside that, it's also equity of discomfort. So that there's no particular group, no particular identity that is bearing the majority of the discomfort in a space. Everybody's getting a little taste, right? And so to me, oftentimes people can understand that when you're doing this kind of zero-sum game where it's like, oh, I'm losing something. It's like, well, maybe, but think about what it's like. Yeah, you went to that church one time and you experienced what it was like, and you got out and you were like, whoo, that was hard. Imagine if you had to go back to that church every day for the rest of your life. Imagine the parts of you that would change. Imagine how you would get assimilated into some things that maybe you didn't want to get assimilated into, right? Like, imagine that for yourself. That is the thing that we are trying to create here, right? That's the thing that we're solving for. We're beginning with this equity of discomfort so that we can move towards this equity of comfort and power. And people can understand that conceptually, to be able to say, if that is the way you understand it, maybe that's something worth funding. But if you're saying, too many white people up in here, we got to get some more, got to get some out and get some of us in. Like, that's a hard one. That's a hard sell, You might find it somewhere, but that's a hard sell, It really is. So to me, it's trying to find a way to articulate the bridge, but also ways to articulate your own lived experience in ways that other people can recognize, in ways people can see themselves. That's what we're asking. We're asking to be in spaces where we can be seen. And so I think we can model that a little bit from time to time. And so to me, that's the way that, from a funding perspective, when I'm talking to funders about supporting things that are about systems change and about social justice, it's very much trying to find this entry point around some things that folks can understand. And, some of them are actually quite simple. Quite simple ways to find that entry point, because again, if you can understand that there's a bridge, then you can be invested in to build it. Right? You have to be able to see the bridge first. And if you are a place that can see the bridge, I think that there are funders out there who would support you building it. That's how Aaron Dworkin built Sphinx. He saw something, he saw a bridge, and people supported him to build it. He had evidence that he could build. And I think that other people have done that as well. And so I think that, to me, from a funding perspective, when you think about funding, it's not just trying to figure out what the funder wants, because what they want is they want to solve a problem. And on your side, you're trying to figure out, is there a solution to that problem? So sometimes they're not wanting to see more of the same. It's like, where are these spaces where they're the right minds in the conversation to solve the problem? And that's been, so at CMCB, we oftentimes try to seek funding where people are funding our strategy. It's not necessarily just funding a program. Some funders will only fund a program, but we talk a lot about what our strategy is. What is our theory of change? And also from an operational and programmatic perspective, how are we building pathways towards the change we seek? And that is a thing that I think sometimes resonates with funders.
I'm looking at the clock, and I want to make sure that we are respectful of your time. But I do also just want to make sure that we talk a little bit about your work in Boston and what you're doing up there with the youth. And, you spoke earlier about, when you were coming up in conservatories and being, the one or the one of two. And so I'm really curious about, the work that you're doing now with these kids and, is part of that sort of helping that young kid that's still inside you sort of feel a little bit more included?
Yeah, I think it's actually interesting you should talk about that young kid inside me. One of the things I've been learning in my own therapeutic practice is around the idea of reparenting oneself.
Yes, absolutely.
And I do feel quite a bit of that in my own professional work, that there are these spaces, because I'm working with young people, where I do get these opportunities to reparent myself, and because I get to watch people go down this path knowing that I was part of their story. And so that means that I get to go back to little Lecolion, little Junior, who he was at the time, go back to little Junior and like reparent him, not only through my therapeutic practice, but also through my professional practice as well. So I'm glad you asked me that. In Boston, one of the things that Community Music Center Boston is thinking a lot about is this idea of pathways and outcomes. It's more thinking about there are these other kinds of people who engage in music learning when they're young. And oftentimes they are the ones who are on the side. And because if you're not looking for this kind of pre-professional performance thing, conservatory training, music school training, then they're like, okay, well, you can just take some lessons. But there's not really outcomes that are attached to you. And so at CMCB, we've kind of started to think about, well, what are these outcomes that we can attach to folks? So we have one of our outcomes is a professional musician. If someone who wants that track, of course, the Community Music Center of Boston can support that person and be part of their journey. But then we think about, what about someone who is a musical explorer, someone who maybe wants to play 9 instruments, or someone who wants to play one instrument, but in 9 different genres. Right. And so we're thinking about, how do you support someone who's actually doing this, maybe not going to do this thing, they're doing this other thing. So how do you support that as actually an outcome that you recognize? How do you support the young person who, like myself, I was, when I was in band in Texas, I wanted to be good enough to be in the top band because my best friends were in the top band. Right. It was the sense of that community was really important to me in my development, right? And so some people, they're like, well, the reason I'm in youth orchestra is because my best friends are in youth orchestra. And so I'm going to try to get in for that. Do I want to be a professional musician? No, but I feel this sense of community around making music with other people. And you see that in community choirs, church choirs, community wind ensembles, community orchestras. Every city has one. Right. And so there are these people who that is meaningful to them. And so with CMCB, we're trying to think about, well, how do we support someone who is just thinking about themselves in this community musician space? And then how do you support someone? And the fourth outcome that we have is, how do you support someone who is a citizen musician, someone who thinks about their music and that they want to change the world around them via their artistic practice? Maybe they want to be a performer that is not performing in the ways that's traditional. They want to do something different. They want to be someone who is, doing community-based performances. They want to be a music therapist. They want to be a music educator, right? They're thinking about this from a very different perspective. And what are the ways in which, as an organization, you can support their path when they're 14 and not waiting until they're finished? And so at CMCB, that's the thing that we're trying to solve for right now, and trying to articulate that in a way that is clear, but then also figuring out pathways to it. So that's what we have. We have our 4 student pathways that will hopefully allow us to be able to be more intentional about these things. Not saying there's one and then there's this throw off stuff and you can kind of do what you want and we don't think about it. You want to do that? That's fine. Whatevs, but it's more like, well, if you don't want to do this one thing, then let's talk about these other 3. Do any of these resonate with you? And some things that are prescribed and that they're intentional. And then how do you then create, I wouldn't go so far as to call it a curriculum, but how do you create things that are like capstones and benchmarks along the way so that someone can feel this sense of progress the same way you feel going from book 1 to book 2 to book 3? How do you create that? And so to me, that is at CMCB right now, that's the big why, the big thing that we're solving for from a curricular perspective. And I'm glad you asked me about it.
Wow. That is fantastic. And thank you so much for doing that work, because I think there are so many of us growing up who didn't have those opportunities and didn't have somebody asking us those kinds of questions. And it's just so important. And I feel so energized by this conversation. I don't know about anyone else. But, Professor, Pastor, President Washington, I just want to thank you so much for being here. And before we let you go, are there, where can people go to support you? Where can people go to follow you and everything that you're up to and all of the good work that you're doing?
Thank you. I am at Lecolion everywhere, I think. So you can find me there. And it's a nice thing about having a name like Lecolion. You don't have to search. I don't have to 73. Like that's just at Lecolion. And then looking at www.cmcb, Community Music Center of Boston, cmcb.org. And poke around and see the things that we're doing there. We're right now in a capital campaign. We just bought a building recently that's going to be a beautiful space in a predominantly Black neighborhood in Roxbury here in Boston. We just closed on that building in January, so we're in the process of seeking funding to take this type of thinking and this type of institutional expertise to that community. So. Yeah, definitely. If anyone is interested in supporting us or interested in learning more about our work, please reach out to us at www.cmcb.org, or you can, again, look me up, Lecolion, at Lecolion, and I'm Lecolion at cmcb.org. So you can find my email address pretty easily.
All right. Well, we will have all of that in the show notes, all of those links. So everyone, please go check all of Lecolion's amazing work. I hope we can do this again because I feel like we didn't even really scratch the surface. There's so many questions I want to ask you and so many things I want to pick your brain about. But I guess I'll just have to wait for next time. But Lecolion Washington, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, I'd love to be back. Thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciated the time.
Awesome. And we will be right back.
What up, classmates? Time for another morning announcements. My name is Emilia, and I'm your resident violinist with a passion for collaboration in the arts, and I'm here to encourage you to go experience live art. This is a short list of events and experiences that we here at Art Class think are kind of dope and maybe you should check out. The conversation with Lecolion Washington today made me want to highlight his organization, the Community Music Center of Boston, and their work in equity in music education. The Community Music Center of Boston, or CMCB, is an arts education nonprofit founded in 1910 with a mission to transform lives through providing equitable access to excellent music education and arts experiences. They are the largest external provider of arts education to the Boston Public Schools, supporting rigorous, relevant, and culturally inclusive musical instruction for one of the most diverse school districts in the nation. The next live event hosted by CMCB is on May 16th and features Chase Elodia's Perennials. The Perennials is a Brooklyn-based ensemble founded in 2020. The band combines a collaborative and improvisational sensibility nourished by singer-songwriters and electronic artists like Michelle Ndegeocello, Norma Winstone, and Becca Stevens. The group frequently tours across the U.S. and abroad and is set to release their next album in the spring of 2024. Hear them live at the Community Music Center of Boston, May 16th at 7 p.m. In keeping with my equity theme for the day, the Harlem Chamber Players will be playing a concert at the Met on May 10th and 11th. The Ethel and Friends music series is part of a larger date night concert series at the Met's Great Hall Balcony Cafe. The date night series artists perform 3 sets on Fridays and Saturdays from 6 to 8:30 p.m. For this date night event, the Harlem Chamber Players and additional guests Hassan Anderson on oboe and Lydia Brown on piano will be performing a program dominated by African-American composers including Florence Price, William Grant Still, Samuel Coleridge Taylor, and Margaret Bonds, just to name a few. The date night concert series is free with admission to the Met Museum, and the Met offers pay-what-you-wish admission for all New York State residents and all New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut students with a valid student ID. I'll round out the announcements here with a group I used to play with. The Sphinx Virtuosi is a dynamic and inspiring professional self-conducted chamber orchestra. Comprised of 18 accomplished Black and Latinx artists, a critical aim of the Sphinx Virtuosi is to evolve and transform the face of classical music through artistic excellence, pioneering programming, and impassioned community engagement. Its members serve as cultural and diversity ambassadors for audiences and communities around the United States and abroad. Their current concert tour program includes music by Andrea Casarubios, Adolphus Hailstork, two members of the ensemble who are also composers, Quentin Blash and Xavier Foley, and known African-American composer Coleridge Taylor Perkinson. You can catch this program on tour right now through July, with upcoming concerts in Rhode Island, New York, and Nashville, Tennessee. As always, if you'd like more information on any of the things that I've highlighted in the morning announcements, check out the links in our show notes, and I'll be back next time with more cool live art for you to experience. Bye, friends.
Up next in art class, we have part 2 of a conversation with the fantastic, amazing, super duper smart Sona Jobarteh, who is world renowned for being the first female professional kora player. Get back into our conversation where we will talk more about decolonizing the arts through education, through how we can give a culturally rooted, culturally affirming education experience to our young folks. So I hope you enjoy. Check out part 1 if you haven't already. Here we go with Sona Jobarteh. I feel like when I look across history, it is always artists who are at the forefront of major radical change, of major, movements and activism. And I definitely see that showing up directly in how you founded the Gambia School and have articulated so well why it's important for us to completely reform the way education happens for Africans. Can you talk a bit about what the Gambia School seeks to do, how it seeks to change the current model? What is it that needs to better reflect our culture, better educate our children, and why is music and culture, dance as well, like such an important part of that?
Well, to really address that holistically, I guess I have to just kind of strip it down to the beginning and the core of it. And where it starts is that the education systems that are prevalent or that we have across the entire continent were not education systems that were designed by Africans to empower Africans. They were designed by non-Africans to disempower Africans. And that was a very systematic and effective form of oppression and control that continues to be prevalent across the entire continent. There's no better way to sustain a status quo than to make sure that you still obtain or have retained the control over people's mindsets. And so for me, that is a system that we have yet to succeed in. As I often say, as we celebrate, 50 plus years of independence, we are yet to really see a state of mental independence for Africans across the continent. And that is very hard to achieve if you do not normalize an education system that is there to serve the mental development of Africans in the capacity for them to be able to support their own development within the continent. And so this is why, for me, this education system is a necessary part of that journey. We cannot talk about liberating Africans or developing the economy or empowering young women or whatever these stories are without us tackling that very crucial point of the education systems are setting up that trajectory from day one. And these are systems that were implemented in a very crucial era in African history during colonialism to succeed in the very thing that they are still there succeeding in. And so we have to, rather than better the education system, we need to reintroduce a new education system that is designed from the very inception to support the development of Africans from the day one. So we're not acting against something, we are working with something. So this for me is a kind of false sense of progress when we have still that staple education system there. And yet we are still sort of putting all our attention into bringing these kind of initiatives and ideas and projects and engagements for young people, which I'm not knocking. I think they're brilliant. But as I say, they're battling against a core that is still there. And we're still not talking about uprooting that. So it's, for me, it's like 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. It means we're still staying in the same place. So it's a false sense of progress, I think, until we have those more difficult conversations of uprooting the systems, which is always a bit harder than talking about bringing initiatives. And in Africa, there is a temptation to keep bringing initiatives rather than uproot existing systems because of the complexity of that. So what I'm doing here is trying to uproot a system, which is a lot more of a harder journey, and it takes a lot longer to see the benefits of that than it does to bring an initiative, which tomorrow you can launch and you can see those results very quickly. I think this is where I'm encouraging more people to look at those long-term sustainable goals of reformation within the education sector. That takes a lot more time. So this, for me, yes, reintroducing a new curriculum that starts from the beginning, brings culture to the center of that experience. And this is something that, again, I want to make sure that it's not pigeonhole because I'm an artist and people sort of say, oh, you're teaching kids music and kora and dance. And again, that's part of the problem. The innate connection between the expressions of African culture has to be at the center of our education system. Some of those expressions of African culture can be found within dance, can be found within the kora, can be found within singing, can be found within many different art forms. It could be in any other creative. It could be poetry. It could be journalism. It could be writing. It could be singing. It doesn't matter. These are all cultural expressions, and it just so happens that we have students that are doing it in specific areas. But that's not the point. The point is, cultural expression must be at the center of our education system, because otherwise, how do Africans feel connected to their culture in those educated years? And in other countries where you have people of the country experiencing an education system that was designed by their country, that is totally normal. And we don't even talk about it, right? We don't talk about the fact that in schools in the UK, people learn to play the piano. It's amazing, or play the violin. It's really great that they're getting in touch with their culture. We don't have those conversations. Well, of course, they go to school and learn how to play the violin because the violin is pretty associated with that culture. Yeah. So the fact we still talk about it in terms that it is to be treated as something interesting or amazing compounds and reinforces that there is a real mental problem that we have in that context. So this is what I'm raising awareness to. And I'm saying it is not a music school. It is an educational institution that, of course, needs to teach all the aspects of cultural expression that Africans have at their disposal in order to reinforce and to reevaluate their sense of self within a world that is very much still, set out to efface that. So this is why I kind of say, yes, we do music, but that is not what we are doing. It's just a form of cultural expression within a wider context of education.
Absolutely. And I think about the music as a language so connected to our language. And I know I experienced a transformation when I went to college and got to experience going to a Black-centered school for the first time. I went to a historically Black college and university, Howard University. And even in my first year, when I was a freshman, I remember reading a Kenyan author, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Yeah. Reading his book, Something Torn Anew, changed my life. It really did, because he articulated why it was so important for us to be able to name ourselves in our own language, be able to have a sense of sovereignty over ourselves, and what happens when you're viewing yourself and your culture through someone else's eyes and someone else's language. I'm also thinking about gender and, gender disparities as well. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to why you see this education is specifically important to girls and women, and what happens when girls and women are empowered, how that impacts the entire community and entire nations.
When we're, for example, picking up the instrument like the kora, as I was, as a woman, as a human female, I'm also tapping into something which has a lot more deeper resonance. Therefore, what I'm advocating for now is understanding that what we are doing is strengthening the culture. not weakening it or changing it or breaking, as people often say, that I'm breaking tradition. I'm actually maintaining it and I'm strengthening it. Why? Not because I'm saying that this should have been a female tradition. There's context to why women weren't, and we need to go into that historical context before we pass judgment. However, there is, within the context of that full understanding, we can still stand here today and say it is essential, not important, but essential that women are contributors to the development and growth of this tradition into the future, because we live in a society now where women are taking spaces that they did not have before. They're occupying, and they need to occupy spaces that were not there before. Society has changed. We no longer have a monarchy. We no longer have a system where we all just live in little village units where my family and your family. We're talking about a globalized world now where a click of a button, you send something across the planet. There's a whole new understanding of social relationships between men and women and between families, and even the whole sense of the griot tradition. How does that exist within a globalized society? So with all these questions, for our traditions to survive, hopefully for hundreds of years more to come, we must start to redefine and take very valuable adaptations, as it has always happened. And that's something that, again, I remind people, from 700 years ago, this tradition has adapted and adapted and adapted time and time again to get to this point. The kora was not traditional at some point. It was a modern instrument. It didn't exist in the time that this tradition was really formally established. So we have to question this concept of traditional versus modern, because I feel that that's a trap. And I feel that's a trap that has been reinforced and imposed on Africa even in stronger terms, in order to almost keep this sense of archaicness, to preserve that sense of Africa being a model of what civilization was like. What is African music? What is African, even as I have in this argument recently about what is African architecture? Why is African architecture automatically got to be like round mud huts? Africans today don't want to live in mud huts, right? And that shouldn't be an issue, right? So there is, but it doesn't undermine what that relevance that had historically. So this is where we are allowed to, it's almost like we are fighting for permission to talk about Africa being modern, not being less African. To be modern is African, right? And so the idea that modernization is taking us away from our Africanness is a dialogue or a discourse I'm trying to undo, because that is, for me, again, another trap. And so as we talk about women coming into these traditions, these are part of the same context of strengthening our traditions, strengthening our connection to the future of our traditions, and women taking a very important role within that. So just alongside, we have women, young girls taking part in instruments, playing instruments that they were not permitted to play before. We also have another thing going on where we have non-griots taking part in learning instruments that they, taking part in learning griot instruments. And that is, if not as equally different to women coming in. And in some senses, I would say, I think there's perhaps even more resistance, I think, to non-griots, male non-griots taking up these instruments than even griot women. Because I feel that if I had not had the name, and at least I belong to this family. So I know that my contribution, though I'm a woman, I'm still contributing to that framework and structure of the griot tradition. I think it may have been, and it's hard to speculate, but I genuinely feel, having worked alongside and being somebody that's a vector of bringing those people in, I'm seeing the difficulties that they're having as being huge and sometimes insurmountable. And so then now I've got a situation where I've got young women who are women and non-griots. So it's like, wow, this is a double, whammy that I haven't even had to climb. So these are things that I think that are very important for our traditions and for our elders, or as we go through the generations, to really think critically about, is young people will just turn away from the traditions if we don't allow them to continue to evolve. And I say continue to because they have before. If we don't allow them to continue to evolve, young people will just turn away from them, and they'll turn to other musical forms and other cultures, which is happening a lot, in order to express themselves and to feel relevant today. And so this is really what Barinyakumo, this album, is also about, which is setting example, setting a precedent to young people that to express yourselves and to be relevant today, to speak critically and openly, you can use your own traditions, you can use your own languages, and you can put it right at the heart of your culture. You don't have to abandon it to be able to be modern or critical.
Absolutely. I think of Africanness as being about innovation, being
Yes.
about constantly taking things to the future and constantly remixing and reworking. One final question, Sona. You have been on tour in the United States, and I was especially excited to see you touring with Taj Mahal. And again, knowing that your album is so Pan-African in nature, what has it been like to play your music alongside other people of the African diaspora, and how do you see our connectedness and feel our connectedness happening in those moments?
Probably if I had to say what is an undercurrent throughout is still the essence of bringing people of African descent to a place where they feel ownership at a very close level towards their cultural heritage. And of course, the fact that I'm trying to encourage connection with people's African roots, that doesn't mean you have to like redefine yourself, right? And I think that's something that I especially experienced when I started working with young Americans, young African Americans, was realizing how much they, I think by default, felt that for them to really connect with their African heritage, they had to almost kind of be a different person, right? Kind of be born again. And I think for me, I feel that isn't necessarily what is needed. And I think what I've enjoyed seeing in the communities that I have come into touch with, either through teaching or through performing, has been that feeling that, yes, there's an affirmation of who we are as we are, with all of the journey and the history that we have been through, that doesn't make us any less connected than somebody else. And I think that's a very empowering position, and a very important position actually to be in, because I feel there's a weakness in feeling that you aren't who you are until you are kind of, initiated into some kind of, I don't know, sometimes I think it's a kind of a bit of a fantasy land. And I think that what I'm trying to say, this is real, this is tangible. Mm-hmm. You already are it. Even if you don't see it or feel it, you are it. You are living and breathing it. And I think that for me, especially in the younger generations, was incredibly empowering for young, especially when they're in the arts as well, because I think that gives them another voice and doesn't make them feel that it's something that they have to continually search for. It's something that they already own, and it's already a part of them. The only difference is that they now have to mentally reconnect. But it's not anything more than that. And I think was something that I feel has been powerful for me, actually, not just for them, but powerful for me to see the power in people feeling that and really having that close connection from an innate level rather than from a kind of top-down level.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for those beautiful reflections. Yes, we are African no matter where we go. And that is part of why this segment is called Kinfolk, because I very much feel that you couldn't erase it from us if you tried.
Yes. No.
Yeah.
And it's tried is an understatement. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much. This conversation has been delightful. Is there anything coming up that you would like to share with our audiences? I know your tour is still going on. You all can go to Sona's website and we will have that in the show notes. Is there anything else you would like to share before you depart?
I think that's it. Yeah. I mean, I'm starting the tour. I think it's Friday. Tomorrow I'm headed out to the States. So yeah, I'll be on the road for the next 3 weeks in the States. And I think that's the bulk of my US tours done for 2024. Feels like I'm an honorary American citizen now. I've spent more time there than I have in most other places over the last couple of years. But yeah, this will be the last batch for this year. And then I will return to Europe, the tours in Europe and the rest of the world.
Wonderful. We wish you safe and joyful travels. Thank you so much, Sona, for joining us. And we will be right back with the rest of the podcast, everyone.
And we are back, and it is time for our favorite part of the show. It is time for Pure Black Joy. This is the moment when we shout out something Black that is making us happy this week. And I think this week it is Dr. Bynum's turn. Is that correct?
It is. And I am so excited about this because this brings together like so many things that I absolutely love. So there is a very, very brilliant author named Ladarian Williams, who has written a very exciting new book that is just coming out. It's called Blood at the Root. And essentially, it is a Hogwarts-style story set at an HBCU.
Oh my
if
gosh.
this book wasn't written for me, I actually don't know what was. So super excited to share. I think folks should check it out, give him a bit of support, and also make sure you tell your friends, because this is how Hollywood finds out. And I would love to be able to announce at a later date that Blood at the Root is becoming a feature film. So please do go out there and support Black fiction, Black science fiction, Afrofuturism, Black comic books, all of the above, because a lot of fantastic stories are being told and are not being told elsewhere.
And I feel like you can get your wizardry fix without having to support that anti-trans lady.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm just saying.
I am the target audience for this. I need alternatives. So support.
Absolutely. So congratulations, Mr. Williams. And you have some fans over here on the East Coast.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for today, everybody. I'm exhausted. That was a lot of talking.
He got us together.
Yes.
I feel like he got the world together. In that
I really
conversation.
do. Really, seriously. Thank you so much to Lecolion Washington, to Sona Jobarteh, to everyone out there for listening and being a part of these conversations. I'm so excited to get this out into the world and see what people have to say. But I want to hear what you have to say. We all do. So ourclasspod@gmail.com. And we got some lovely letters last week that I think maybe we will read, maybe not next time, but the time after, because next time we are going to share the amazing conversation that we had live at the David Rubenstein Atrium. Yeah, I'm going to keep saying it correctly. Earlier last month with the incredible Nona Hendricks. Which was just such an incredible experience, and so excited to share that with all of you. So come back in 2 weeks and hear our conversation with Miss Hendricks. But until then, any words of wisdom, my friends?
Yes.
Ooh.
Register to vote.
Oh, please, God. please do that. Please do that. Anyway, but I think that's going to do it for this episode of Our Class. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we will see you in a couple weeks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for checking out Lincoln Center's Art Class. The show is hosted by Lee Bynum, Paige Reynolds, aka Mabole Inawale, and me, Rocky Jones. The show is produced and edited by yours truly. Our artwork is by Patricia Sanchez Navarro, and our music is Dope Skeletons by Frequently Asked Music. If you enjoyed what you heard, you can really help us out by telling all of your people about the show, subscribing on your podcast platform of choice, and yes, leaving us a positive review wherever you're listening, but especially on Apple Podcasts. It's a small act, but it really, really helps us out, and we just might read your review on air. If you'd like to learn more about the show, please visit the Art Class page at lincolncenter.org, follow all of Lincoln Center's various social media profiles, and feel free to reach out to us anytime at artclasspod@gmail.com. We'll see you next time, and until then, class is dismissed.